Woo!
Hey guys, welcome back to another Destiny 2 video. Today, my goal was to make the tankiest Titan build possible. Now, I want to point out there are multiple different ways you can actually accomplish this. One of the ways is with stasis, but this was a way that was actually recommended by a commenter down in my last video. Shout out to Julian Perez. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Again, I can't pronounce half the things in the English language, but he recommended a build using Heart of Inmost Light, which in his opinion was a very slept on exotic. And personally, I completely agree with this. This was something I got way back in Forsaken, kind of used when Stasis came out, but hadn't really given it that much attention. And after kind of experimenting with what he recommended and as a starting point for this build, I really saw an incredible playstyle that this could actually turn into. So without further ado, let's get right into the build. I'll show you how you can become an Immortal Titan in Destiny 2. So starting off, we are on Middle Tree Sentinel. For those of you that don't know, that's code of the commander, and we're basically going to be utilizing Tactical Strike along with Controlled Demolition and Resupply. And essentially, our grenade and our melee create these void explosions that upon detonation give us health back for us as well as our fire team, at least those who are nearby, and also replenish energy for our abilities. And using Heart of Inmost Light, for those that don't know, essentially using any of our abilities, whether it's the grenade, melee, or barricade, empowers the other two. And whenever that empowerment buff goes on, you have about 10 seconds, I think it is, for those abilities to recharge even faster, and your grenades do more damage, your melee does more damage, and your barricade has more hit points. So essentially the whole point of this build is just spamming our abilities, getting them back as fast as we can, having them hit a lot harder, and using mods to benefit our survivability with that, because we already have natural health regen occurring with our subclass. Jumping right into the armor and the mods. So on our helmet, we're actually rocking Reaping Wellmaker, and Reaping Wellmaker essentially grants whatever weapon kill you get after using your class ability, a Void Well will spawn. Now, we'll point out this is much more usable on hunters as they get their class abilities the fastest at max investment in their class-specific ability, but specifically with Heart of Inmost Light, by spamming our barricade as often as we can get it in our other abilities, we get our barricade and our other abilities faster, and this in turn benefits us through this as well as through our abilities. So while this isn't the best perk in my opinion, I think it's a fantastic way to actually consistently spawn these void wells that this build relies on. We're also rocking dual Ashes assets because again, grenades are incredibly strong this season and we're not really utilizing any specific weapon for this build. So if you want to swap these out and say use dual finders for some reason, you totally can. And as far as other mods, it's really up to your discretion. But Reaping Wellmaker is an incredibly potent perk for this build. Moving on to our gauntlets, we have Elemental Charge. The main reason for this is because this build relies on picking up wells. This is something I've used a lot in well-based video guides because simply picking up a well grants us 2 charges of light if it matches our subclass. Again, a very efficient way to get charges of light as long as you have a way to spawn those wells consistently. And I think this is the perfect way to do it. You'll see why we're using Charge of Light in a second to increase their survivability. The next mob we're using is also Impulse Recycler, simply because final blows with your grenade grant grenade energy, and combining this not only with the natural grenade regeneration of Middle Tree Sentinel, but also with Heart of Inmost Light and Impulse Recyclers, and again, we're double dipping with this perk, we basically get a grenade every single time we throw it. And again, with Heart of Inmost Light, these grenades then also do more damage along with our melee, and our barricade has more health. Again, we spam our barricade, we get void wells, and this all synergizes incredibly well. So Impulse Recycler is a must. Now believe me, if you're rocking Energy Accelerant and Breach and Clear like a lot of people are, you are going to have to take off one of those, but with a build like this, it is well worth it, I promise you. Moving on to our exotic and our chest piece, again, is Heart of Inmost Light. Again, basically any ability that we use, we then have a 10-second period with our other 2 abilities, also have increased regeneration and deal more damage, or simply if we're using our barricade, has more hit points for it, and this enables us to chain our abilities very effectively along with everything else we're using. For this, I'm simply using Elemental Ordnance. It's a very simple mod, but it enables all those grenades we're throwing to actually spawn these void wells. Again, this is a very effective way to do it. I personally believe the best way possible to spawn void wells with this subclass. So this is a must. Again, we're not really using anything as far as weapon types or heavies or anything like that. So whatever mods you want to rock here, you can totally rock. Again, I'm just using a sniper and a melee resistance damage mod simply because to help with survivability in various aspects. As depending on your weapons, either up close or far away, could be very, very harmful for you. So I'm just using a bit of both to kind of get the best out of both worlds. Moving on to our Greaves, we then have Protective Light. Now, for those that don't know, Protective Light is absolutely insane. I don't know the exact damage resistance it gives you, but it is incredibly noticeable. I'm talking attacks that should have killed you outright deal barely any damage. This is why we're rocking that Charge with Light and Elemental Empower mod, because with 2 stacks of Charge with Light, we effectively get about 10 seconds, I believe, of this Protective Light damage resistance. Now, it does bring down our strength, so if you want to rock a mod to kind of bring that up, you totally can. But again, with the health regen of our super and our subclass, with the health regen that comes from us using our abilities, along with Protective Light, whenever we are critically low on health, you're basically invincible. Now, I want to specify, don't rock this and run into a Grandmaster and expect to survive getting stomped by a champion or the boss. You'll die every time. Protective Light only takes effect, even if you are charged with light, whenever you have your shields broken and are critically wounded. If something can straight out one-shot you from full health, Protective Light will not proc. We're also going to be using Absolution. Again, I'm double dipping because we're not really using any specific weapons. If you are, feel free to go ahead and slot for those. But again, picking up Orbs of Power reduces all ability cooldowns, again helping us out with our Heart of Inmost Light and our natural ability regen for this build. So we always have our grenade, we always have our barricade, we always have our melee, again helping everything go smoothly. And then finally on our mark, we're actually using a few mods. The first is Well of Tenacity, essentially picking up a Void Elemental Well that we are spawning with a lot of other means with this class, reduces the damage you take from combatants for a short period of time. Now, I want to point out that this is not dependent on your health. So if this would have something, for example, when you're critically wounded, you already have a Protective Light charged, and you pick up a Void Well, Well of Tenacity will then take an effect, and those effects do stack. So it is very noticeable. I will say Well of Tenacity is not as potent as Protective Light. I don't have an exact number, but the difference between having Protective Light procced versus having Well of Tenacity procced is very noticeable. So the stacking effect is appreciated, but Protective Light is arguably the more potent of the two. So the real purpose of this goal is, hey, if you're critically wounded, Protective Light helps you in that regard, and if you're just kind of half health or a little bit above, Well of Tenacity comes in. But if you can time it, these two effects will stack when you are critically wounded, enabling you to shrug off huge damage and just start running through ads without a care in the world. Again, unless you are critically wounded, Protective Light will not proc. So again, don't expect that just because you have Well of Tenacity, you can survive everything, or Protective Light will protect you. You have to get critically wounded first. So it's better in instances where you're running into a whole group of ads and they start slowly wearing you down until you get to critical health, versus you running up to a champion and getting one shot. One of those will work, one of those, well, you die. Moving on to their mods, we're also using Energy Accelerant. Now, I know it says Dragonfly, Chain Reaction, and Firefly are benefiting from Energy Accelerant, but for those that don't know, essentially any elemental explosion is affected by Energy Accelerant. This includes various weapons that don't specifically have perks like these on them, as well as different abilities, so you do have to do some testing. I'm sure you can find random threads online, other YouTube videos, doing a full breakdown of everything. I have a few weapon recommendations on my last Void Titan build that actually break down what major weapons are and are not affected by this. Essentially, any pure elemental explosion is. So if you remember my last video, something like Severance Enclosure was not affected because it's not technically an elemental explosion. And then finally, we have Distribution, just so whenever we use our class ability, it reduces all of our cooldowns, again, playing into that Heart of Inmost Light, enabling a higher potency of all our abilities across the board. Now, as far as weapons go, it's really up to your discretion. I personally take advantage of Crown Splitter just because, again, we are using Energy Accelerant, meaning that we have a very good boss killer weapon on us at all times. And essentially, a huge pick for me is anything with Demolitionist or Adrenaline Junkie is hugely recommended because, again, we're throwing so many different grenades, it's not even funny. So having something that can either help you regen grenades even faster, or having something that takes advantage of a bonus damage perk on top of dealing with those grenades like Adrenaline Junkie is highly recommended because it really plays into the potency of this build. But just as a recommendation, something like Crown Splitter is a good heavy weapon, or Deathbringer I found also works really well, along with Energy Accelerant. For a Demolitionist weapon, I always prefer the Aikilos SMG. I think it's one of the best SMGs in the game for PvE and even PvP for that matter. I have a Threat Detector Demolitionist roll. Really, as long as you have Demolitionist, you're good to go. And then for your kinetic, really whatever you prefer. A few recommendations I have are Chroma Rush. I have one with Feeding Frenzy and Adrenaline Junkie, and it really starts tearing through ads, especially when you're throwing as many grenades as you are with this build. As well as Ignition Code. I have one with Blinding Grenades, And it's a really good kind of mobbing tool in case you are weak and you need a second away from ads. You simply shoot this in a general group and they're all blind for a few seconds, enabling you to recover, gain your composure, and get back into the fight. But without further ado, guys, that's the build today. Again, thank you, Julian, for actually recommending this video. Sorry again if I didn't pronounce your name correctly. I'm really bad at that, but thank you again for the video and the recommendation. I greatly appreciated trying something like this out because, again, I have not used this since really when Stasis first came out, and I was kind of experimenting with the class a little bit. So something like this was a breath of fresh air from what I normally do. And again, I love doing videos like this, seeing your guys' recommendations in the comments and kind of what you experiment with, your suggestions, because you always bring up stuff that I would have never thought of, and I love having a little change of pace like this. But if you guys like what you saw today, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button.
Just by clicking that button down there, you can make a difference in one man with way too big of an ego.
Share with a friend down below if you think they like some mediocre Destiny content like this, and let me know what else you want to see in the build video. So let me know down below if you have a secret build that you've been rocking that you want to give some love. But again, if you like what you see, be sure to let me know down in the comments, subscribe and like the video, and thanks for watching.